O believers, be upholders of justice and bearers of witness to truth for the sake of Allah, even though it may be either against yourselves or against your parents and kinsmen, or the rich or the poor. For Allah is more concerned with their well-being than you are. Do not then follow your own desires, lest you keep away from justice. And now for us. If you twist or turn away from the truth, know that Allah is well aware of all that you do. Justice Cornelius was an embodiment of justice. It's not been mentioned to you, I'll just share this with you. He stood first in the examinations administered by the Allahabad University for matriculation, for intermediate and for BSc Honours. He was a graduate in mathematics, physics and chemistry. And at a young age of about 23 years, he was selected by the Premier Service of India, the Indian ICS, the Indian Civil Service. The finest men and women were selected there. And thereafter he went to Selwyn College, Cambridge, where again he excelled. What I'm impressing upon you is that such a brilliant man who was in the civil service, who would have reached the heights of prominence in the policy-making circles, in the administrative circles, within 4 years said no to all that. And in 1930, he joined the judiciary. In the judiciary, at a very young age of, I would say, sometime in his 30s, he was selected, he was elevated to the High Court. I'm sorry, there's so much, so many microphones, I can't even hold this. What do I do? Thank you. Thank you. I'll have to minimize my requirements. So, he was elevated to the judiciary at the age of 41 in the High Court, Lahore High Court. Within 7 years, ladies and gentlemen, he distinguished himself and he was elevated to the Federal Court of Pakistan. I have spent a total of 19 years in the judiciary in the High Court and the Supreme Court. Justice Cornelius spent 17 years in the Supreme Court of Pakistan. He was one of the longest serving Chief Justices of Pakistan, from 1960 to 1968. And in times that were difficult, because Pakistan was an embryonic state, it was growing, it was trying to grapple with all the difficulties of a young country, and of course there were political issues. In 1955, Justice Cornelius, who was by then in this, it was called the Federal Court. In the following year, when the Constitution came, it became the Supreme Court in 1956. In the Federal Court, he was the lone voice which said that the dissolution of the Assembly, Constituent Assembly, by the Governor General was illegal. That judgment today is hailed as an outstanding rendition of justice, for the reason that the majority decided that the Sindh High Court did not have the jurisdiction to decide the matter. And therefore, no, there was no judgment of the Sindh High Court which could be assailed. It was an illegal judgment. The majority allowed technicality to avoid the truth. And when truth was avoided, justice was avoided. Today, one man's voice is celebrated in our circles. The rest of the men, although they include many distinguished jurists, the majority are not mentioned at all. This is the course of history, and this is the message to any judge who wants to stay on the right course. The course written for us, dictated to us, directed to us by none less than the Almighty through the Holy Quran. But that was not all about Justice Cornelius. He was a simple man. Today I am informed that he stayed in one room for 40 years. He lived there simply. He had no assets when he retired, and from his pension he paid the bills of this hotel. It was in this hotel where he lived. And I went and saw that room just now, a short while ago. But another beautiful thing about it. In 1968, he was to retire in May of 1968. But his colleague, Justice S.A. Rahman, who had worked with him for years in the Supreme Court, was to retire before that. So in order that Justice S.A. Rahman may become Chief Justice also, do you know what Justice Cornelius did? 2 months prior to his retirement, he resigned from office. He sacrificed. This was a man who had the capability to give and to share. These are the qualities which I will submit respectfully judges must have if they have to be justice. I feel inspired by the gentleman because he wrote brilliant judgments also. I just mentioned you the 1955 judgment in the Tamizuddin case. Then there was this famous Doso case in 1958, which is the one that legitimized martial law for the first time in Pakistan. But an offshoot before the court in that case was whether fundamental rights that had been violated prior to the martial law and the cases were pending in the courts, whether those petitions would abate or continue to be enforced. The general tendency was that everything is closed. The Constitution is abrogated and a new legal order has started. But Justice Cornelius wouldn't believe that. He said, but this happened before the abrogation took place. These rights for fundamental rights accrued and were claimed before the abrogation took place. So even after the abrogation, those fundamental rights will be enforced. And this is the way the gentleman conducted himself. He did something similar in Abul Ala Maudoudi's case in 1964.